Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Monday, March 11th, 2019. This is a meeting of the Town of Halifax Finance Committee. We're being recorded by Area 58. On tonight's agenda, mail, meeting minutes, budget discussion, and as may arise. At 7:30 p.m., we have an appointment with the Halifax Elementary School and Silver Lake Regional High School representatives. And an executive session will be held at the conclusion of the meeting. And before that, we'll have public participation and adjournment. Under mail, we have a meeting notice from the town administrator, Charlie Seelig, about scheduling our executive session at the conclusion of tonight's meeting to discuss collective bargaining. We have a memo from Charlie Seelig, town administrator, for temporary help in the selectman's office. We all received a copy of this via email. Starting on April 1st, Irma Vassal is the secretary 2 position in the selectman's office for 30 hours per week, will be out on leave for estimated. Charlie, do I have to read the entire memo?
No.
Okay. We all were able to review this ahead of time. Is there anything else you want to add to what we have in front of us?
No, we have a likely candidate to fill the position. I'm hoping someone who had worked in the selectman's office before, probably until about 10 years ago. They contacted her and she said she was interested, at least filling it for most of the time that we need somebody. I mean, there may be a week off because of their family wedding that she needs to attend to, but for the most part we'll be able to do that. I need to send her a job offer letter to confirm if there's something in writing for her to confirm. But my hope is that we'll be able to have someone, as opposed to bringing somebody in who has never worked in the selectman's office to get somebody in.
Yeah.
They may not be familiar with everything that's going on at this moment, but they understand the functions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Wow, the whole gang's here.
I know, it feels so full.
I know, it's awesome.
So, in order to do all this, I need to do a reserve fund transfer for that, the amount that I mentioned.
Okay.
What we would be doing is grade 2, step 1, 19 hours a week, so we don't have to worry about benefits. Irma is at grade 4, she's at step 4 or 5 at this point, she works 30 hours, so.
Okay.
We're not trying to match dollar for dollar what we would normally be spending, but she'll be out for a minimum of 6 weeks, possibly a little bit longer because of medical. But the assumption is she's returning. There's not a reason that we don't think she is. But it's going to be a period of recuperation for her, and she won't be able to come to work during that time.
Right.
I'm looking for another hearing.
So this would be a temporary secretary 1 position. The total cost would be $14.59 per hour times 19 hours per week for the estimated 7 weeks for a total of $1,940.47. So, does anyone have any?
It should be there.
Yeah, it's the next one, and we just hit this one first because it was in mail. And technically, we don't have the reserve fund transfer.
Okay, so I can write it up.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Does anyone want to ask Charlie any questions about the proposed temporary position?
It's fine.
Okay, we'll just.
Where's it for again?
It's for a secretary 1 position, so it's the selectman secretary.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No,
I got it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So, are any questions before I start filling the form out? Once, twice.
well, you wanna just give a synopsis? Should I hold it?
I thought, okay, which one are we talking about now?
The selectman's the same one
I
we're
think
talking
I
about.
just did.
Oh, okay, I was reading.
So it'll be, it's okay. We had it over, that's a copy of the same one that we received over email, so it's just a temporary fill-in for the leave period of the current selectman's
Oh, yeah,
secretary.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I got this.
Does anyone else want to see the hard copy? Okay. So
I'll
again,
get a form together.
okay.
Kim can speak to the police chief.
Okay, so the total cost would be $14.59 per hour times 19 hours per week times 7 weeks for a total of $1,940.47. And Charlie's going to write up a request from for a reserve fund transfer for the amount of $1,940.47. So what we can do now while Charlie's running up the paperwork is take a vote on the request for a reserve fund transfer. Kathy, do you happen to have a reserve fund balance?
I don't have that with me
Okay.
tonight.
The requested reserve fund amount is $1,947.
$1,940.47.
I think you have a lot in there still.
I think we do.
Yeah, you haven't really,
We haven't really dipped into it.
no, luckily.
Yeah. Would anyone like to make a motion? We can continue to discuss once we have a motion in a second, but it would be for, again, $1,940.47 from the reserve fund.
Yeah.
We can continue discussing it once we have a motion in a second. But someone has to make a motion and then someone else has to second for us to continue procedurally to discuss it.
Go ahead, I'll do it. What's the amount? So we're making a motion to
To
do a reserve fund transfer, the amount of
$1,940.
$1,940.47
Yeah.
for coverage for the selectmen's office admin temporary help.
And I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second, okay. We don't have our reserve fund balance information here now, but we haven't really spent much out of it. And just as a reminder for the folks that are new, the reserve fund, the policy that we follow is that it's for unforeseen expenses. So things that this wasn't something we've talked about before, we anticipated happening. It's an unanticipated leave that's being taken by the person that currently occupies the role. One thing that Charlie notes in the memo is that he's not sure when the permanent employee will be returning. If that person's return is delayed, he'll come back to us and we'll discuss then what we know moving forward about the continuation of the temporary help. But as for right now, he's using kind of the safe estimate of a 7-week fill-in. So he's gonna write up the paperwork now, but we can still continue if we have any questions for Charlie, or Kim might be able to answer some of them too, but if does anyone want to ask anything else of Charlie when he comes back? Okay. So all those in favor of reserve fund transfer? I mean, technically we have quorum, which is a weird thing. It's weird. Normally when one of us steps out of the room, we don't have quorum anymore.
He's coming back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. We had a motion and a second for the amount of $1,940.47 as a reserve fund transfer. And I was just gonna hold the vote unless you or anyone else
No
wants.
further questions.
Okay. All those in favor of $1,940.47 from the reserve fund?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we'll wait, when Charlie comes back, we'll have multiple copies of the form that we'll all sign.
That's a finance committee. Let's do that.
Okay. Also in the mail, we have a copy of the Beacon from the Massachusetts Municipal Association. If anyone wants to take a look at that, I'll leave the hard copy on the table. We have a memo to the Board of Selectmen, FinCom, Capital Planning, Police Chief, and Municipal and School Building Committee. Scott Materna has asked about the possibility of one of the police cruisers that might be traded in. It could instead be transferred to the Municipal and School Building Committee for its use. It would be helpful to have that discussion with everyone in the room at some point within the next month. I don't know when we'll have a joint. Kim, do you happen to know if we're planning on having a joint capital planning and Board of Selectmen meeting to talk about this reuse of the police cruisers?
I know that capital planning and finance are meeting on Wednesday, right? Aren't we kind of doing a combo?
Is that our combo meeting?
I could see if Tom or Troy could be there. I mean, I'm definitely
Okay.
going to be there because I'm part of capital planning.
Okay.
I haven't really looked into the pluses and minuses. I haven't talked
Yeah.
to Scott Materna about it, so
Yeah.
I can't really speak to it today.
Okay.
I
That's
know
fine.
that other departments have said that in the past, they wanted that, but it's always been an issue with trying to get it scheduled and stuff like that, so that's why. In the past, it's always been no, we're getting like a vehicle, an extra vehicle for stuff.
Yeah, so.
Because like the assessor's office would love what they drive around.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, plus, but that's not why Scott Materna wants it.
No, I have no idea, I'm just pointing out that.
So he
in
just
the
got a new
past.
truck, so I'm kind of confused about why they would need it, so
Yeah.
I couldn't really speak to it.
Okay.
Like, I think We have talked in the past, in fact, we brought it to town meeting at one point to see if we could have a car, and it was turned down. That was
Right.
about 5 or 6 years ago.
Mhm.
You could try it again. You
Well, I
know?
was just pointing out that
Yeah.
it seems like we've tried that before and it didn't
Yeah.
work.
So Charlie, did they have a request for the police?
I believe so.
Yep, it's right here. It's the next thing in the pile.
Oh, all right, I thought you were doing all your reserves together. Sorry.
I think
That's
it's just
okay.
the correspondence one piece at a time.
Yeah, and then I was just,
Oh,
I was,
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Let's just get this.
Hi, Gordon, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
All right, so everyone, there's 3 copies of this. This is the reserve fund transfer that we just voted on. So everyone takes a line and signs.
Thank you.
All right, so we will, we'll wait for that, for any kind of joint discussion that we have with capital planning and the Board of Selectmen concerning the request to reuse one of the police cruisers. Thank you.
Charlie?
The next is a request for transfer from the reserve fund. A request is hereby made for the following transfer from the reserve fund in accordance with Chapter 40, Section 6 of the Mass General Laws. Amount requested $5,500 to be transferred to police chief salary line. Present balance and appropriation blank. The amount requested will be used to fund the education component of the contract between the Board of Selectmen and Police Chief Schaub's $5,500 for a master's degree in criminal justice or law enforcement. This expenditure is extraordinary and/or unforeseen for the following reasons: to fulfill the obligations under contract signed by the Board of Selectmen and Chief Schaub's.
So our previous chief didn't have an education incentive. When we were lucky enough to find a candidate who was willing to take the salary, and so the education incentive is the same of which the police officers receive for their education. So we're asking, we didn't have the funding in the line item because, again, the previous chief didn't receive an incentive.
And in fact, the education incentive for the chief is for a master's degree at the same amount that we would be paying for a bachelor's
Right.
under the union contract.
Right, so we're actually, he's kind of getting a little gypped. So that amount wasn't budgeted because we had no idea who was going to have the position.
So the amount is for $5,500, and it again is coming from the reserve fund. So that's the same reserve fund that we just voted for. The other one was unforeseen expenses. We can continue asking Charlie and or Kim questions, but does anyone want to make a motion concerning the reserve fund transfer?
Can I see that?
Yep. Does anyone else want to see a hard copy? Because there's 3 copies.
So he's pursuing the master's degree?
No, he hasn't. He has the master. So when we were going, first of all, we were very lucky to find a candidate that was willing to settle for the base salary because we are grossly underpaying a police chief based on our research. So we found a candidate that was willing to take the position. He has an education. We had never budgeted for that. Again, we didn't need to. He agreed, we're giving him the same, not even the same, we're giving him a discounted education bonus compared to what the other officers do, that he settled for that. And we don't have the money in the line item because when we budgeted last year, we didn't know who we were gonna hire.
So it's in the line item for next year then?
Yes.
So this is just bridging the gap to next year? Salary?
Yeah, because we didn't have it in the year. It's prorated for how many months he's been here. And then next year you'll see it in his line item.
So,
2020.
So I'll entertain a motion regarding the request for transfer from reserve fund for the amount of $5,500 from the reserve fund to police chief's salary.
So,
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any other questions or anything else we want to discuss from either Kim or Charlie about it? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the only other piece of mail that we have is a notice concerning the scrivener's error was discovered in chapter 167 of the bylaws. Attached is corrected page 23 of chapter 167 of said bylaws. Please disregard the current page 23 and replace with this corrected page. Summary of use regulations. So I think I still have either Kathy or I has the binder that has the complete set of bylaws for the finance committee, but I'll pass this around in case anyone wants to take a look. And we'll just, Kathy or I will swap that page out. Okay. There's nothing else in mail. Meeting minutes, we have 3 sets of meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look over the ones that were in our packets? You should have one for February 11th, February 25th, and March 6th.
Yep.
Okay. So for the meeting minutes of Monday, February 11th, 2019, members present were Fred, Len, Bill, and Melinda. Does anyone have a motion concerning the meeting minutes from Monday, February 11th, 2019?
I just had one thing that I noticed on page 4. When I had asked about the decreasing the brush pickup. It says Steve stated the brush pickup is only 1 day a week. It's actually 1 day a month. So I know it doesn't help my argument. But, I would say 1 day a month.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else for the meeting minutes? So what we can do is entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the, as long as the typo on page 4 is fixed, and instead of brush pickup being once a week, brush pickup's once a month.
I'll make a motion to approve the 7 minutes.
I'll second.
Motion and second, any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
And then, Brad, you will abstain because you weren't present. So,
Actually, both of them.
all right, Len, do you want this copy to sign?
Sure.
All right, meeting minutes for Monday, February 25th, 2019. The members that were present were Fred, Len, Bill, and Melinda. Oops, this was this was the short meeting right before the, yeah, special. Would anyone like to make a motion concerning the meeting minutes from Monday, February 25th, 2019?
I will second.
Moved in second. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Just one.
This one, there's all 3 of us.
Yeah. Okay, so we also have meeting minutes for Monday, March 6th, 2019. We didn't have quorum, but we still held the discussions with the 2 chiefs, so I think we can still vote concerning the minutes. We didn't actually conduct official business, we didn't take votes that night. So the members present were Fred, Melinda, and Brad.
And I apologize for bailing on that. I was
That's okay.
out of state. They have a quorum anyway, right? Because Brad.
No, I wasn't.
No.
Here.
Yeah.
But the only question I have is Monday is not March 6th, it would have been the 4th. I believe the 6th is,
Yeah, this
It
was
wasn't
Wednesday. This was
Monday, it was
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Oh, so it's,
It's Wednesday, March 6th.
so it should be Wednesday. the
yeah,
6th.
okay. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve with the edit to change the date to
I'll make a
Wednesday, March
motion to
6th?
approve with the edit, the meetings for Wednesday, March 6th.
We have a motion, we have a second.
So I guess I second since I was only there.
Okay. For all those present, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions?
Staying.
Abstain.
Okay, so it's 3 and then 2 abstentions.
Should I still sign this regardless?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. So our so at 7:30 we have scheduled the Halifax Elementary School and Silver Lake Regional High School. So we're a few minutes ahead. So what we could do for the next couple minutes is just fill in the folks that weren't here about the discussions that we had with the police chief and the fire chief at that meeting from Wednesday, the March 6th. So the budget sheets that you have in front of you were printed on that date. I have notes on this one, which I can pass along, and I also have the notes as well as what's in the meeting minutes. We basically went through line by line. We explained to the chiefs what we've been doing, which is all the level funded or decreased lines we've been voting on preliminarily to recommend, and we have to go back and obviously revisit those. But we went through each line and basically asked the chiefs to talk a little bit more about them. What's in these binders in terms of the budget proposals may not be the most updated ones. The most updated fire and police budget requests are in our emails. So I can always forward those back to everybody, but those are the ones that would have been sent from Sandy to us that would have been updated probably on or about February 28th. So as we've been doing with each of the departments, we sort of go through one line at a time, ask about the reasons for requests for increases, why there might be decreases in particular lines, any concerns that we might be having. The one thing that we won't, although Charlie, would you feel comfortable speaking to when we get to the discussion of the budget about the kind of where we are in terms of projections?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there's nothing confidential I said to you folks. It couldn't be considered confidential.
Right.
Looking for zoning?
Upstairs.
Well, we've got a couple of interesting things.
Hi, Cam.
Oh, hi, Mr. Klein.
So I guess what the other thing we can talk about until the Silver Lake folks come back in is sort of the general calendar. So we have to have as many recommendations as is humanly possible done by April, let's say 4th, because that's when the warrant goes to press. And we'd like to have as many of the articles on them to have whether or not the Finance Committee recommends that article in it. So that people don't just get a book that's printed with Finance Committee will recommend at town meeting. We want to have as many of them done as we can. So if we sort of reverse engineer that, it means that last week in March, we'll try to get as many of the articles as we can done. The week before that second to last week, which will be next week, we'll try to get the budget done. Now we've already handled some of the lines already, like we said, but we'll have to go back to any that had fluctuations in them and really sit down and think about what requests we'd like to make. Now, coming up tonight's meeting, because the schools are such a large portion of our budget, we should be in a place to, and we'll ask Kim and Charlie about whether or not we should communicate to all the department heads sort of where we stand and the extent to which we might be asking for further cuts from all departments, or asking all departments to go back and look at the proposals that they've made, which is why I'd asked Charlie if he was comfortable giving us a sense of projection-wise where we think that we stand, because we know that, for example, this top sheet here from the March 6th meeting is already outdated because they found different calculations that might have an effect on sort of how we view the entire budget. So I think. Come in.
Well, they're not hanging out in the hallway, but I'll come in.
I don't know if
It's a happening place.
Yeah, apparently.
Summer, do you think that, does the elementary school want to go first? I don't know if Silver Lake, if the high school's still waiting on folks. or-
Sure, whatever. It's cool with me. Gordon's
I
here, I
think-
don't know if he's...
I think you don't know, is Joy here?
Joy is on her way.
Okay, right, she had a
We
meeting
just had
somewhere
our
else.
school committee.
Yeah.
We have the budget. I haven't seen it.
I can ask.
Hey, friend.
You need a copy? Yes.
Yeah, is that the version?
Oh, I
two?
thought you had,
No.
I think we asked for electronic ones. Joy might be bringing them, but,
she is bringing them.
okay.
I'm looking at the elementary school.
Oh, I'm sorry, I would have, I thought you had a copy of it from the meeting, the latest version.
I think we asked for the electronics because we got like new members and stuff, but if Joy's gonna bring hard copies, then that should be fine. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
So actually, we can take a second and introduce everyone because I think a lot of folks in the room probably don't know each other. We've got some new finance committee members and some folks that are new to their roles on whatever respective committee. So do you all want to introduce yourselves first?
Sure.
Gordon Andrews on the Halifax Elementary School Committee and Silver Lake, and I was on finance up until last year.
Summer Schmeling, I am chair of the Halifax Elementary School Committee
Bob Johnson, I'm a school committee member.
for Halifax.
You want me to? Sure. Hi, I'm Christine Haley, Director of Business Services for Silver Lake.
Jill Prue, Assistant Superintendent, Silver Lake.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. My name's Christy. I'm a writer with the Plimpton Halifax.
I'm Jason Frazier. I'm the chairman of the Silver Lake Regional School Committee, non-resident.
I'm Fred McGovern. I am relatively new to the Finance Committee, started in November of last year. I do know most of the Silver Lake regional individuals, as I've been to quite a few meetings, including last year before I even started with the Finance Committee. I was going to their meetings.
I'm Melinda Tarsi. I'm the chair of the finance committee.
Brad Graham, I'm the real newbie. This is my second meeting.
Yeah, there you go.
Len Tessino, this is my first year on the finance committee.
And Bill McElroy.
I know Joy's on the way,
Since my work.
but I didn't know if either the elementary school folks would prefer to go first, the Silver Lake folks would prefer to go first. We wanted to put everyone together because we know we've got some overlap, obviously, in people's different roles. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of related discussion, I guess, going on concerning education costs. So I don't know if anyone has a preference for who'd like to go first.
It doesn't matter to me. It's in the document. Maybe you- Version 2, yeah. This is the one.
Can I ask Jason about the roof? Silver Lake? What the status is?
Well, if we want to start with the high school, we can start with the high school.
Okay, it doesn't have to do with the budget, it's an upcoming cost, so I just kind of want to know where we're standing with that. Jason, what's the status on the roofs? I know that at the last meeting I attended, you had mentioned that they were going to be looking at the roofs over the break to determine if they could be repaired or if they need to be replaced. Was that done?
So I'll just walk you through some of the same information. Christine and I can tag team on this. We've noticed that we've been having some water infiltration issues at both of our buildings, the high school and the middle school now, for about 6 or 7 years. We actually had a building envelope study done on both buildings by certified engineers 6 years ago, and we did share it with all 3 towns. Since then, we've been using the capital plan to do repairs in-house and to contract out to try and minimize that water infiltration. What we've discovered is during the bad winter in 2015, we were ordered by fire marshal to shovel off the roof of our building where we would lose our occupancy permit. Some of the shoveling that was done made micro tears in the membrane on the roof, so we incurred new leaks in the building. We have had an infrared exam of our building done. The infrared exam, you can see if there's wet spots because it holds heat differently than non-wet parts of our roof. And we found some substantial areas of water infiltration. That's led us to this next step where we're actually doing cuts into the roof on purpose to dig down all the way to the deck to see what the status of the insulation is underneath the roof and where our major areas of concern are. We do have a substantial number put into our capital plan budget for this year to deal with all the leaks that we find, and we're hoping that this will give us at least 6 to 8 more years of roof life. The concern is right now with the MSBA grants being so popular statewide because many other schools also punctured the membranes on their roof. They've changed the qualification from 20-year-old roofs to 25-year-old roofs. We're actually working right now with the company at Silver Lake that did the work over here at Halifax Elementary School. We're very pleased with the outcome of your project, so we've been working closely with them. And that's where we are right now. Christine, have the physical cuts been done yet?
My understanding is that each time it's been scheduled, we've had snow.
Yeah.
And so every time they've had schedules to actually make the cuts, there has been snow, so they have not been able to do that. But that is the last piece that we're waiting for. We were able to take care of the most critical emergency items to stop the major infiltration that's happening right now.
Gordon and I have had serious concerns about whether or not we should continue to sink dollars into this or if we should address it and redo the roofs in totality. I asked the engineer, who's not the person who would be putting on the roof, so I wanted his opinion of how much it would probably cost to cover 25,000 square feet of roofs. And his number came in between $6.5 and $8.1 million for the 2 roofs of both buildings. So obviously you can see the incentive for us to try and get out to the point where MSBA would be able to cover 40, 50, or even 60% of that roof for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one spare copy. I know we're going to get other physical copies. I have one spare copy of the version 2 of the elementary school budget, which I can pass around to folks, but I don't know if the members of the elementary school committee want to start off by maybe hitting some of the major points of their budget request for this year, where you see the lines where there are significant changes, where you see any cost savings potentially, just for anyone who wasn't able to attend the meeting on, I forget what night it was, March 4th.
So we have in the budget currently, we have the shared costs updated to what was voted at the joint Union 31 and Silver Lake meeting. That's an increase of $9,339.38. We reduced the budget for a known retirement of $30,000. We increased the circuit breaker from 60 to 65%, which was a decrease of $35,833. There was a reduction for the SPED program change of $39,119, and a reduction of textbooks. This is all from the first request of the budget, not a reduction of year over year. And then a reduction for technology to be covered by the REAP grant of $5,700. So at that meeting, we also had discussion on the bus situation, what's going on with the busing. We found out that currently we have 9 buses at the elementary school and 10 buses for Silver Lake. And Kingston was buying the other portion of that bus. So I motioned in the meeting to take back that bus because of the busing issues that we've had. The whole time that I've been on the elementary school, basically, there hasn't been a meeting when we haven't discussed busing and how overcrowding it is. how many students are being picked up and dropped off because of the overcrowding. So I increased the budget that night, $31,769 to account for that bus.
So originally we were gonna type up a article for, a separate article in the town meeting warrant for the bus, and we thought we were gonna be responsible for Halifax alone, which is gonna be about $62,000. Turns out, like Gordon said, we can share the bus with Kingston,
No,
so it's only a third.
Or Silver Lake.
Right, but Kingston buys the other half,
No,
right?
Kingston was buying the other half of the bus. We're taking back our half of the bus. So
Okay.
Kingston's gonna have to fund our full bus at this point.
Okay. Regardless, so half the bus, so we had a discussion as a committee of putting the half of the bus cost into our operating budget, because, moving forward, we don't necessarily see it being something we want to bring to town meeting every single year. Obviously, if we find out that we add this bus to our operating budget and then it turns out that we don't need it, we can remove it, but it just made more sense to put it in our operating budget at this time. Just so, for a little background for people who didn't know about the textbook situation, last year when we presented our budget, we asked the town if they wanted us to put half of the money for the math textbooks in the budget last year and the other half of the money in this year. And we were in harder financial times last year, so the town requested that we not do that and we fully fund the math textbooks this year. So that was about, $70,000, $80,000, I think, for those books, 70. Here she is.
So if you're looking at the line item for the textbooks, you'll see that the textbook line versus last year, so last year was, the current fiscal year is 11,500. This year it's been increased to 81,000. And basically, that increase is 1% of the whole elementary school budget.
Right.
So when we look at the overall number and see that the elementary school for just the day budget is up 4.38%, more than 1% of that increase is those textbooks that have been delayed for probably since Bill first joined the committee. We've been talking about textbooks. So it's something that's been continually delayed. And finally, we're at the point where we can't delay those textbooks anymore. So looking at the other big issue that's been a driving factor. Did you guys get that?
Yeah, we got that. So Joy just passed out the hard copy. The Halifax Elementary's at the back of this packet. So if I could borrow back the copy that has my notes on it, that'd be awesome, because that's me, yep, and then whatever other ones. Thank you.
So if you're looking at the special ed numbers over the last number of years, we've seen a continual growth. If you go to the last page and look at page 6, it's the very last page. It says page 6 at the bottom. So if you're looking at the SPED tuition and transportation, you'll see that we've had very large increases over the past number of years, and this year we're projecting about a $43,000 reduction there over last year's cost. We did see an increase in the transportation in this fiscal year because there was a change in companies and who was providing service. So there was a large increase this year that's being covered by this year's budget, right? We're able to.
Correct. We're able to absorb that.
Yeah. So there's no new classroom teachers in this budget.
There's no new but it's a level service budget, basically.
The only change really is the bus.
Yeah, minus the bus.
So, does anyone have any questions or so far? We can obviously continue to ask, but I just had a quick question about the bus. So based on what you know about the bus routes and the utilization rates of the buses, how confident are you that adding this half of the bus will sufficiently address the issues that you're having? But I'm asking because I know you mentioned, well, if it doesn't work out, we can take it back out next year, right? But it seems like unless there has been a lot of discussion about this half a bus making a big impact, that's a pretty big risk to take to see if something actually works out the way that we want it to.
So right now, the numbers of kids on the buses is at the point where they're basically all overcrowded, and we're seeing behavioral issues take place on the buses. So there's a number of factors to that, but overcrowding is an issue. We had enrollment down to 582 last year, and now we're up to 610. So that increase there alone is half a bus, because you're talking about 70 students per bus. So, and we have to provide busing for each student. Whether or not they take their seat is another story, but each bus has to be programmed out so that every student has a seat on that bus.
That's part of the issue. The other part of the issue is the long bus ride. So some of these elementary kids are on this bus for an hour, legitimately an
It
hour.
has been that for quite a long time though.
Yeah. And we, like Gordon said, there are some pretty heavy behavioral issues going on, which we are addressing through various channels. Like, we're having discussions with the bus company, we are having discussions with the building principals to try to do like some sort of assembly where they talk about bus behavior. There was a discussion at our last meeting about whether or not adding this extra bus will actually curb some of those issues. And I mean, frankly, there's really no way for us to know that, honestly. We're sort of hoping this will alleviate some of the problems, at least the wait time that these kids are on the bus.
One of the other items that happened this year was when the bus routes first were set up, the superintendent went to the bus company and asked if we could change buses to a larger capacity bus for some of the routes. So we did make changes in that aspect this year too, and we're still seeing overcrowding with the bus situation.
But that was like a gift kind of that he gave us.
Well,
So-
it wasn't any money associated with that.
No,
but
there
that was
wasn't.
a solution.
Right, but moving forward, that's not like the way that it's going.
Right.
That was just a one-time thing. And, I had another thought, I had a follow-up thought on that. Oh, contracts, when we go back out to bid, we had a discussion about lengthening the contract, getting newer buses, because we've had mechanical issues, getting, the video cameras on either end of the bus, just to kind of curtail some of these behavior issues that we're having. We did do a study 2 years ago with the bus company where we paid them to kind of analyze our routes, analyze, you know, where our stops are or whatever, again, to try to like alleviate some of the pickup drop off, and the expense. And they basically told us we got nothing.
The routes are identical though for the high school and the elementary school, is that correct?
That I don't know.
The stops aren't identical, depends on where the children are.
Right, I know, the route is exactly the same, not the stops, but the route is exactly the same.
Well, the routes are a little different with the one less bus. There's a difference, but they're close.
Now, the only reason I ask is because my son takes bus 25 and that bus is not crowded.
The secondary is very different.
Yeah, well, no, but it was never crowded. When I was in the elementary school, I mean, we would be lucky if there was 12 to 15 kids on that bus. Not to mention it came so early in the morning, the bus was getting there before it was even supposed to leave the depot, which is why a lot of parents take their kids to school. I don't even we drive my son to the high school every day because that bus comes by at 6:10 in the morning when it's not even, and this is the high school, when it's not even supposed to leave the depot until after that time. So when you're talking about leaving kids on the bus for a long time, when a bus is sitting up there for 15 extra minutes, that's part of the problem as well. The buses are getting there too early, and then you're adding an additional 15 minutes, which adds into your behavioral problems because you're sitting up there
That
and
is
you
the
can't get into
behavioral
the
problem.
school.
Like, we are well aware of that. Like, even if you watch the video, the kids are relatively well behaved until they pull into that driveway, and then it's 15 minutes of chaos until they get off that bus. So we are well aware.
So my point is, I think you also have to take a look at the bus schedule. Because if they're getting there too early, and you're telling me that's behavioral problems, if they're getting there maybe 5 minutes before they're supposed to, wouldn't that relieve your behavioral problems?
And
that's part of the discussion, yeah.
And I think that's why the question I had was whether or not buying this half the bus actually addresses the problem, right? Because it also creates, right, we know that in the version 1 of the budget, the entire elementary school budget was up 3.8%. And you realize the savings based on a retirement we were kind of conservatively not placing into the calculation, but now putting this back in, it's a 4.4% increase. We know that 1% of those is textbooks, and that's been an ongoing discussion, but that's why there's such a big item being added in version 2 of the budget. My big question was whether or not this actually, if we can project as much as we can, whether or not this is actually going to fix the problem, given that it seems to be an issue with multiple variables.
So I think at one level you have to look at, you have 30 more kids in the school system versus the projected enrollment last year. So that's half a bus right there. And you have overcrowding on all the other buses. So when you just do the math out at the number of students.
And what's the projection of 6th grade going into 7th grade? Are the numbers increasing, in other words?
No.
In other words, are you taking off enough from the high school that when you add in the elementary, you're getting more into the to the high school?
No, so the enrollment numbers for this upcoming year, I believe we're pretty level when I looked at the long-term calculation.
Yeah, I think it was...
Like 608,
6 going into 7 is 87, so.
Okay.
And our kindergarten class was almost 100 this year, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty high.
This year as of October 1, it was 82.
Oh, really? I thought it was more than that.
But it might be up now. Well, this is the October 1 official enrollment. We've been running between 80 and 99, grade 2 is 99.
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers because, again, they take into account our assessment value that we have to pay for the whole thing. So if you take a look, our numbers are actually low. In other words, the number of seniors coming off and then the numbers coming up to middle school, we're in a trend, a downward trend for like the next 2 to 3 years. But then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing the upward trend again. So it's something that we have to take into account because, again, our assessment costs are going to go up in 2 to 3 years.
So besides the textbooks, besides the bus, where do you see the biggest areas of increased requests coming from in your budget? Or where are the sort of, again, I think we're putting this to every department. If you had a priority list, the areas where you've made significant increase requests or requests for significant increases, how would you prioritize as a school committee those? Because one of the things that we've done in kind of continuing what we've done the last few years, the Finance Committee has agreed to philosophically, if we can, maintain a $300,000 buffer so that we're not actually taxing to the full capacity that we could. So as we're going through and meeting with each department, what we've done so far is preliminarily approved all of the level fund requests and any that were decreases, just to get a sense of where we are over last year. And then meeting with each of the department heads and committees to talk about lines where they've asked for increases. And with every department, we've said, we may come back to you and say, can you prioritize? Can you give us the silver version of the gold budget that you'd originally wanted if we need to look for cuts? Because this is our first night meeting with both the school committees at once. We just met with the chiefs last week, but we still have a couple other department heads to meet with, and we're just trying to make sure everyone gets the same information and it gets communicated to everybody, kind of where we are and how we're viewing the budget.
So what do you have for Prop 2.5, local receipts, and other increasing?
Charlie, are these the most updated from March 6th?
Well, yeah, well, the local, so let me walk through, the property tax, we're looking at right now a new growth figure of, I think it's about 113,000 is what we have done from the Board of Assessors office, which is a little bit higher than what we agreed to back in November. It may still go up further. I'm not sure it's going to be material out of a $25 million budget, but nevertheless, along with the Proposition 2.5 increase, we'll have some property tax money. Local receipts, I had talked to Sandy about this on Friday. Outside of motor vehicle, we're just leaving things alone at this point. There are two categories where most of our money comes in. It's motor vehicle and the ambulance. receipts. Motor vehicle, we agreed that we could bump it up by about $40,000 from what we had originally estimated back in November. That still leaves us a little bit of cushion between what we're actually bringing in and our projected number. We tended to be conservative about that, seeing what has happened in other communities where they've overestimated motor vehicle receipts. The other areas of the ambulance, while we're being told by our billing company that we should see some increases in our ambulance receipts, it's not panning out exactly the way they have indicated they thought it was going to. And until we see a few more months, we're not willing to bump that from what it's been. And the state aid number, we're using the governor's budget. Given that they're still behind on their revenues for fiscal 19, their regular local aid, not Chapter 70, but the regular local aid, that's not going to change $1. But once governor has produced that number, the state legislature hasn't changed that in a number of years. They base that on what the state revenue picture has been in the past, and that gets so. Chapter 70, I have my doubts if that's going to change anything dramatically, simply because if they're not getting the revenues needed right now, I'm not sure how they're going to produce for Chapter 70 increase above what the governor's projecting or brought into the state legislature. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but I wouldn't rely on it. So he said, let's bump Chapter 70 by $50,000, for instance. I'd say, well, where are you getting that from? We need to use the governor's numbers at this point. So those are the three major categories, and that's where we're sitting right now.
So, and last year we left the 180 for the senior center. That's still out there too?
Yeah, well, we're using part of that, of course, for the fire suppression system. So when Sandy and I ran numbers on Friday, previous to that, we had thought that we were in a significant hole versus what people were requesting versus what was available. Right now, we're in a much better position, but we haven't made any decisions, obviously, through the finance committee about, other than the line items that were either level funded or went down. And even if, we could say yes to everything, but that still leaves the questions of, we have union contracts to deal with, we have the wage and personnel board to deal with, and then we have new line items such as stormwater and OSHA to deal with, as examples. And there may be limited funding for increases, but until we get until we've had a more substantial discussion with the finance committee, and what I sent to them was a note back on Friday, or Saturday, I can't remember.
Friday.
To say, look, we need to have a discussion of what we think the total revenue picture is. The line items for which people are requesting increases, and it doesn't matter which department, schools, library, police, fire, highway, you name it, hold off. Don't make a decision yet until we figure what the difference is. We need to put in the step increases, and any mandatory increases such as county retirement. Once you know that, you know how much money you'll have left over what our revenue projection is. Then take everybody who wants an increase in their line item and put them all together, a separate list, and just as you do with the capital plan work, come up with the list of priorities. What are you going to fund first? Are you going to fund a 2% increase for everybody, union, non-union outside the school system, or are you going to get a new highway worker, for instance? That's where things are right now. I mean, it's certainly possible to fund some things. It will not be possible to fund everything. And certainly my advice to the finance committee is, before starting to say yes to increases in line items, is to measure the total amount requested versus what's available, and then start to develop new priorities. And when we run out of money, we run out of money. But the recommendations included leaving the cushion that we have, because we're not having to pay any principal, for instance, for the fire suppression system this coming fiscal year. That's not going to hit until fiscal 21. We're paying some interest instead. But leave a cushion for that, leave the taxpayer relief cushion that we've done, and then work from there.
So do you have the cushion in for the senior center, or you took that?
No.
No, we took it out.
Yeah.
We
Well,
took it out.
it
Well,
was
we
nearly the
swapped
amount
it
of the
for-
fire suppression. 'cause of the
Yeah,
fire
it's
suppression.
180K.
Yeah, we swapped it for the fire suppression, but can I just make,
Yeah.
what we requested at the beginning of the budget season is a level service budget. We didn't ask for level funding, we asked for level service. So in my opinion, the elementary budget is level service, as Summer alluded to. We've known for many years that those textbooks needed to be funded, and we've been the ones that have kicked it down the road, and I think that we need to make things right by funding that. The bus issue, you know, that's another thing for debate. I don't know if it's gonna solve all of the problems, but I do have a question of, I know somebody at the school committee in the audience was concerned about behavior, whether or not we had policies in place. And I think that's an important thing to look at, because policies in place, because I'm sure you have some children that are frequent flyers when it comes to bad behavior on the bus. But if we can have a policy in place that stops that, it would help. So that's my only request, is that even though it's not a financial matter, but.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
So the only other question, just real quickly, is that overlay account is listed on the spreadsheet?
Right, well,
Are we gonna,
I thought last year we were gonna change the way that
it's it ends up being a wash in the sense of all the overlays from all the years have been swapped into one. But money gets taken out to pay for those abatements and exemptions. So every year we've got to balance that off. So let's say we were spending $100,000 in abatements and exemptions, well, we're going to put $100,000 back in the house.
okay. So does this have everyone's request in it up to this point in time?
Oh, we still need wage and personnel.
Yeah, we don't have wage and personnel.
Which is a little.
So if that's 2%, that's $100,000.
It doesn't have contracts in it.
Well, that's pretty, the 100,000 that he mentioned would be for union and non-union, but it doesn't include anything above that 2%. So one of the reasons we're going executive session with the finance committee is to talk about union contracts and where we might be sitting with that.
So it says last year's unused levy was 711.
Yeah. Can I just verify, like we talk about wage and personnel, not being included in the budget, but the school raises are included in the budget. So I just want everybody to be aware that those budgets also include an increase for teachers and other staff.
So it's awful.
That's why we were asking about where you see the other big jumps coming from. But if we leave aside the textbook for a second, which we know there's a history to that discussion, and that you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting this, but basically the payment plan that you're proposing is the most cost efficient one over time, as opposed to sort of paying smaller amounts over longer periods of time. This one-time payment ends up being most one-time payments more efficient and more effective. Right? Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So the textbooks, there's a line, 2,400, that's the 81,000. And then the bus would be included in transportation for 3,312, the 317,926. That includes 31 for a bus.
Yes, it does, that includes the additional.
Okay. And then I just assumed some other increases.
It was an increase in the contract.
Okay. What about the special ed teaching service for 677? There's an increase of like 21,000.
Within that category, that does include some salaries. Let me just take a look, which line are you on?
That's 9223 at the bottom of page one.
So that's all of our special ed teaching staff.
Okay, is that just wage increases?
Yes, so it's wages, cost of living plus steps and lanes, as it game years plus columns for education. I apologize for being 10 minutes late, by the way. I was in a meeting in Kingston that's still a longer executive session, but, and you may have already said this, but in case you didn't, 5 years ago, we went from 10 buses to 9 buses. I don't know if that was discussed. It was. Okay.
We talked about buses, but we didn't mention that.
Okay, so we cut from 10 buses to 9 buses because at that point in time, we had to make cuts to our budget. And so we went down to 9 buses was the choice we made. It was basically a teacher or a bus. And at that time, the school committee believed we could do the buses. And we did do that, but we've seen an increase in numbers again, and that's why we're really feeling the crunch. But 5 years ago, we had always had, and prior to that, we had always had 10 buses in Halifax.
Do you have a projection of what's coming into kindergarten?
The kindergarten numbers again, you know, and not everybody registers. You probably know census are not accurate in town. But we anticipate the numbers about where we've been, somewhere within the 80 to 90 range.
Well, the number for 6th grade is 87. So if it's less than 87, you're going to have a decrease automatically on the number of
I mean,
students taking the bus.
it could go up, you know.
Right, that's why I'm trying to think in my head.
Yeah,
If you go
I
to
don't
90, then you're exacerbating the problem more. If you go down to 80, you're getting a little bit of a relief valve there, so. it's hard to-
Except the kindergarten kids fit better 3 to the seat.
Yeah, it's the big guys that move in, to be honest with you. The fat guys.
And can I just add something? On the buses, there are an average of 67 bodies assigned to each bus. So that's with 3 kids in a row. So that's where some of the dilemmas. The buses are bringing, I know there are parents that bring their students, but based on the numbers alone, those buses have the average of 67 students per bus.
That's how many would be taking the bus if nobody got dropped off though.
Correct. Yes.
And as anybody who drives by the school can see that they drop a lot of people off.
We're hoping this will alleviate that.
So there was actually a
Whole thing.
safety issue that came up that Kim Kim had brought up the safety issue at the
Popping that way.
Sounded like a rumble down the hallway, I just wanted to make sure.
Kim had brought up the safety issue with the fire station previously.
Yes.
With the number of
And it's still an
drop-offs.
issue, yes, it hasn't really helped. We tried to get the highway, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Courtney. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we tried to come up with a different way of having the cars go in and out because it is quite popular. Part of the reason why it's popular is that now the parents don't have to get out of the cars at all and the aides bring the kids to the cars, so more people think it's much easier to do, which I think increases the number of people. But, so we tried to get highway to go in there, we took down some trees, we were trying to see if we could loop more cars in, but it's still been an issue. It's better, but it's still, it is a safety issue where when we have an ambulance that is going out of the bay, it's really hard to navigate it. Now, people have been pulling over on the side of the road and not getting in line, which is a little helpful, but then everybody's trying to pass them, and then you've got 2 sets of road in the road with people pulled over and people are passing, and I'm so surprised we haven't had an accident. So it definitely is an issue. So I don't know if it's, I mean, if you lost one bus, that's not gonna make the difference. Again, I also feel like the fact that we make it easier for the parents increases the number of cars too. I'm glad we're doing nice things like that, but it also can be inconvenient on the other end.
I mean, other than that, the only increases that we really have in our budget are like contracted services, which we really can't do anything about. And we did increase our building maintenance line a little bit because last year with the financial crunch, that was a line that we cut. Same thing with library, we cut library every year. I'm trying to think, technology is always a big one. We do apply for a REAP grant, which we are still getting, thankfully. Typically the cutoff's about 600 kids, so we're squeezing by right now. Which is what, that's like 40 grand?
Yeah, 40.
Yeah. Which buys our Chromebooks.
What are the contracted services?
The special ed contracted services is mostly what she's referring to. We used to pay for what are called wraparound services for students when the special education students get home. It's some supports that are provided to them. They used to be covered under a grant, but the grants for special education that used to cover them, the number has been decreasing, the amount of grant money we've been receiving, and we use the grant to fund our paraprofessionals, our special education paraprofessionals, and we were funding contracted services, but right now, all we can basically fund are the paraprofessionals, the aides. So now the contracted services has moved into the budgets, and that's why the number looks like it's increased so much. It isn't that the number has increased, it's just the budget is seeing it now because the grants aren't covering it, if that makes sense.
Len, it has a lot to do with the students that you have for the current year that you project. And
Is that the 40,000? Because I know it jumped from 16, 17 to 17, 18, which I'm assuming is when the grants roll out, but
Yeah.
jumping from 100 to 141. So
Yeah.
we're discussing a $31,000 bus and trying to poke some holes in some other line items that potentially, like the building maintenance was 15, which would be half. I mean, is there anything that you guys think, looking at your budget other than the salary lines, that
so I mean, last year when we looked at, on that side, when we looked at the budget, the elementary school committee came back and presented $100,000 worth of cuts. So those items aren't all built back into those were, single expenditure things that they're still working with, but some of those items that were cut are gonna have to go back into the budget. So when you're looking at the budget, like when you go through each line of the budget and you see some increases, there's gonna be increases for the things that were decreased last year. Because of the way it was proposed basically in the school system last year, was you guys had to take the brunt of the cuts. And the school system did take the brunt of the cuts. And then you step forward, 6 weeks after the fiscal year starts and we have a special town meeting, and there's a lot more money being spent out. It leaves a sour taste in other departments' view on what happens when a department goes and makes cuts like they were asked to. And then when that money's available to spend, it's not considered to be put back in first.
We also lean on our PTO a lot. So, I mean, and I know that's what they're there for, but, thankfully we have a very generous PTO that helps us fund a lot of the different things that our, even our building principals and our students ask for. And, we also are very fortunate that we have our custodian writes grants. I mean, we're like grant writing constantly. So, I mean, we do what we can, but that's pretty much, we're not buying anything extravagant. At least not that I know of.
The playground that's being fundraised for right now is the one behind the elementary school that's used during the elementary school day. They think that they might be able to, from all either donations or fundraising, be able to rebuild that playground. So there is no money from the budget being spent on that playground. That's all fundraised, just like Hops did.
Yeah, the HOPS people are involved in that.
Right.
Yeah. It was a commitment that they made early on to do that.
Hops?
Yep.
But Hops isn't funding it all.
HOPS is fundraising.
Oh, for that?
Yeah, they're also helping the school one, correct? Yes.
I
don't think so.
They've given,
Yes.
Do what?
I think they have $5,000
Oh,
or more.
so it's 40 from Penridge, and then the booster-thon's like 50 or 60.
Okay, I'm
So
not aware that.
I wasn't aware the house was participating in that.
Yeah,
either,
you might
but
want to check with Jonathan Seeley, because
Okay.
there is money earmarked for that particular,
awesome. For the kindergarten one or for the one down
for
below?
the one down below.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, I'll ask them. Because I want to make sure they are recognized for that, if
Yeah.
they are.
Does anybody have any other questions on this particular budget? I wanted to kind of just ask about the overview of the vocational tuition and transportation budget.
I think mine, the only other question I have is still, and I completely appreciate, like we said, the history of when, like the textbooks, for example, that we kept putting this off, we kept pushing back and saying, no, can we do another year? So I understand, and frankly, we're looking at everyone's budget, both sort of in a current context as well as historical context, is what folks have in other departments too have asked for in previous years and not been able to get. And I think everyone on this committee sort of appreciates that every year is a replay of the same conversations that we're having, right? But kind of to Len's point, that if we had to go back and even make tiny ones or larger requests for cuts. So for example, in the library services line, they kind of the decrease was really minor, and I'm not picking on library service, I'm just looking at one line where there was a relatively minor decrease, and then this year it's a pretty significant increase request. So I think we also, at least I would ask for from the school committee, is to, again, go back to those places where you have been forced to make cuts over more than 1 year, for example, whether they be minor or major, and then communicate to us as the finance committee when we're looking at this and we have to prioritize things. Where are those areas that you feel have been especially harmed by large-scale cuts that have been made over time versus ones that just have sort of numerically small decreases? And again, we can chip away at things to fund the things that you are telling us are really important, like adding in that bus, like the textbooks, which I know I'm in support of. We haven't taken a vote on any element of your budget yet until we got to talk to you all, but that's one of those things that we understand. It's not going to get cheaper. We've been putting it off. Paying for it in one lump sum is the best way to pay for it.
The only other idea from Linda would be if you have money in the capital expenditure side to move the textbook purchase to free cash. And let you weigh that consideration as well as outside. It's a one-time expenditure and just weigh it there.
Yeah, we could look at that. We're gonna have to do a,
Are this capital planning kind of got their list going?
Yeah, we are honing in on that list, so
Okay.
that is maybe a possibility.
Okay.
We're gonna meet on Wednesday, and I can, how much is that going to be?
70,000 for the textbooks?
yeah, 69.
Even if we find
We
the
could
capital or
stack that up
something.
against the other capital expenditure items. I like that idea. At least
But this
take a
would
look
be,
at it.
Yeah.
the only thing this is like a one-time deal, it's not gonna be something that we do all the time.
Right, no, I understand.
So I just want everybody in the room to know that that's not a policy that we want to start. So, yeah. On Wednesday.
It's just something to throw it out there.
Yeah,
to
no,
make
it's a
a
good idea.
priority list.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we might be able to fund it on the operational side too. I mean, I think prefer that, just because we do have to do an ambulance this year. There's a couple of major ticket items that we're trying to fund on the capital side. But, obviously, we're committed to try to get rid of those bucks because,
And we've had the same conversation with every department where we say, okay, is this a realistic request? Are you actually asking for what you need? Not in a sense that you're asking too much, but have any lines, are you kind of artificially downplaying them? And we're asking every department and communicating that. We want as much information from you as to what you want us to think about, or you want us to be considering and weighing when we have to look at the entire spreadsheet. So that's why it's not an interrogation, at least on my part, if I keep asking you stuff, it's to get at the priorities and what you want to communicate to us again. So that's, from my side, why I'm picking at certain things over and over again and just trying to get a sense from you all as to where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the whole amount is 236. Right, so the big ones are the textbooks, which are 70. The technology, which is 11 and a half. The transportation is 44.5, which is, I believe, one was the bus. The special ed teaching service is 21, maintenance was 15. And then the special ed contracting services was 40. So all those together out of the 236, it's in the high hundreds. So you're almost there. So I don't have much history, and so many of us don't because we're new. So that, the largest sum is not just in percentage-wise, but just of the total increase requested is helpful to know. So the textbook thing I hear has been going on for years, so that's helpful to know. Was there something specific we yanked out of the maintenance that we didn't get to do last year that's imminent?
Well, there is imminent issues with the maintenance of the building, but we're going to talk to you guys about asking for an agreement to spend money out of this year's budget on fixing the HVAC system in the cafeteria, because it needs to be replaced. So we think that there is enough money within the budget to cover the cost of doing the replacement of that unit. Normally what happens if there's money left over at the end of the year, the money's turned back into the town, rolls through free cash, and then it would be up to get fixed through that. But basically, I don't think, from what Matt has told us, that,
I don't think it can wait much longer.
so I think it's
Also
gonna,
with the roof project, it makes a lot of sense to do
Right.
it, what we've got,
Yeah, they made that point that while the ceiling's being ripped down for the fire suppression, it'd be the most convenient time to replace something like that with ductwork and things, but.
And that would be a line item transfer that we get in the,
Is it an issue with ductwork or is it the HVAC units?
It's the unit itself, but I guess,
so Alex is more.
don't ask me, I know nothing of, yeah, he's not here right now, he's the guy that knows all of that fancy footwork, but, the way it was explained to us was, while everything's all ripped out, it's easier to just do, because there's electrical, I guess, that's involved in it as well. So while it's open already, it's easier to just go ahead and do it at that time.
I think Christine could probably explain it.
The only other piece I was going to add to that is that I know that the bearings are gone. That's the piece that's critical, that's gone. And they're just not sure how much more life they can get out of it. So we put the investment into repairing the bearings when the unit is
About $8,000
failing,
already this year.
or do we replace the whole unit? And the point was brought up that while the ceilings are being pulled down to replace the fire suppression system, that would be the opportune time to take care of that repair as well. Instead of having everything nice and neat again and then have to come in at a later date. And when it goes, we have to do it then. We won't have a choice at that time. Whereas now we seem to have the opportunity to think about how to best repair that.
My understanding was it was also put in when the cafeteria was the gym, and it doesn't work for the cafeteria the way it would for a gym, and then it was moved through, so it's only keeps like a portion of the cafeteria.
Are there any savings because of all the work that's been done in the school for maintenance?
Utility savings.
Utility savings?
And Alex tracks that pretty.
Yeah. We did have some utility saves, and we were able to make some small reductions for that.
And has the building maintenance budget taken into account the new, with a lack of repairs needed once the new fire suppression system's installed?
I'm sorry, say that one?
I don't think that you've seen a portion of the maintenance line other than compressors being spent towards that fire suppression system in the past 2 years. Because the idea was it was gonna be replaced, so the only thing that they've replaced was the compressors, and they've done a couple patches on lines.
do you mean like the roof, but like the damage to the building as a result of the faulty system? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
replacement parts.
Okay.
You can see in the compressor repairing leaks.
I thought you were talking about like the leak, yeah. like-
So basically, it's been, I think we've replaced the compressor 4 times
I think that's
in the
what that
past
says.
6 years. So basically, there's so many leaks in the dry system that it's just pressing out the air through, that they're burning out the compressor. And when they find big enough leaks that they can patch, they've been patching them.
And what does the
But
compressor cost roughly?
I don't know.
I don't know, I'm sorry.
So do we know if the maintenance budget accounts for the
The
expected increase in longevity to the compressors?
part of what happens is the maintenance budget deals with what is happening at that time. So if our money was going into compressors, we weren't dealing with some other things within the building. So if it's a number that's large enough, we took a reduction. But generally, what would happen is if, I don't have any idea what a compressor costs you.
I don't.
I don't even want to say ballpark. I have no idea. I apologize. But, you know, when you have, it's like your house budget. You know, if something goes, you fix that and you don't fix something else that wasn't as critical. So that's sort of how we've been running with some of this stuff right now. So we're catching up, and the building is going well. And Melinda, could I talk to you about the library? I'm sorry, because you had specifically brought that up. If you go up to page 3 in the detail, I just wanted to show you, because you had specifically mentioned that. So in the middle of the page, on page 3, so if you look at the library, you can see her salary. We have one librarian. This year, by contract, she was put on the teacher salary. Before that, she had not been in the teacher salary, and that's why there's a large increase If you look at the supplies, it was down to $61 when we had the huge decrease in supplies, and it's just stayed steady at 500. The books were at 4,900, and we reduced it to 2,000. That was one of the areas that we did take a pretty big cut last year, and we just increased it to 3,000. So it isn't as, it may have felt large to you, I just wanted you to know there is a reason for it, and it was mainly the salary of the librarian being put on the teacher's contract, and she had not been there before.
No, thank you. And like I said, I was just picked on one that had an increase and just said,
Yeah,
that's why it's helpful for us.
right.
It's like to drill down and it's like, okay, this was contractual, this was
Right.
not,
Exactly.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So-
And another piece to that puzzle is that when we're in negotiations, all the increases are budgeted for under the teaching line, whereas you wouldn't see it separately under the librarian, under the nurse.
Right.
So they're on budget in that one
Right.
area.
Okay. That's helpful.
So there's I guess the point I was trying to get at, and I apologize, is there is a story here, and the committee has done their due diligence and looked at it, and we've looked at it, and I've already talked to the principal quite a few times to get the number down that it was palatable. So, we've tried to do that, and to Gordon's point, we did make large reductions last year, and unfortunately, you can't keep making the reductions, so this year's a little bit of a build back up here. And the textbooks are, one we knew coming. We tried last year to put it in for the extra pay half, but Halifax wasn't at the point that they had the funding to do that. It wouldn't have felt as painful if we split it over 2 years, but.
And like you said, if we buy the textbooks for 1 year, it's like, what, 16,000 or something for the year? But if you buy for 6 years, it's 70,000. It just doesn't make any sense to buy for a year, you know? And to Gordon's point, like about, or maybe it was Mrs. Blackwood that we were talking about, things don't get touched when we're fixing other things, like we have a kitchen floor in our building right now that's gonna need to be replaced. And Mr. Beaudry was saying it's gonna be like a very expensive thing to replace because you have all that equipment in there that needs to be moved out, moved back in, and we just keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And now you're talking about this big ticket item coming up, which we haven't had a discussion about bringing to the capital plan, but you can only patch a floor so many times, you can only patch a roof so many times. It's like, we're kind of spinning in circles at this point because the building is aging.
I think that's one of the things, I know at the last meeting, I believe it was Sandy that mentioned that having an updated capital plan will be a big benefit, not just for you all, obviously, but then for us too, so that we're making sure, for example, like the HVAC unit or the floor, obviously that's a big need, but is there a need that's gonna pop up in 6 months that maybe would have been able to anticipate a little bit better had we sat down and really mapped out a comprehensive capital plan, so that we're not just sort of always feeling we're playing whack-a-mole, which is gonna feel a little bit like that anyway, but if we can get a little bit more foresight, I think that would help all of us.
The only other issue that flooring-wise is the kindergarten wing, which we found out about all the tiles there are cracking as well and being replaced in piecemeal, and eventually will have to be fixed correctly. So that's the other issue that came up from the building project, is the flooring there. And long-term wise, the flooring will be an issue because that's the only thing that hasn't been basically fixed at the school.
And that's why I think it'd be good to know, because if then we decide to, let's say, make plans for certain wings or certain rooms and package them together in different ways, that's gonna change the kind of bids that we might be able to get in. So I think that'll be helpful too, because then we could break down like what projects make sense to order in what ways and to couple with other projects, and where do we think might be able to see some cost savings or just get better deals on things. If we're already bringing work in for a floor, does it make sense to have them work on another one at the same time? Linda, you said you had questions about the vocational and the...
Yeah, I just, because that's the other.
Now, we won't know for sure about the vocational because the students don't have to indicate or apply until April 1st, is it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, was this the line item that caused all the heartburn last minute?
Last year, we put in
Thought we had an extra
we
student.
had the potential for an additional student. What happens is students apply, but they don't always get in, or they don't always decide to go.
Yep.
So, sometimes in August, doesn't seem like a good idea for a 14-year-old in June, doesn't look as good. So they don't always decide to get on the bus and take the long ride there. So we set aside the money in case the student got in. So that's why you get some money back, because the student didn't end up going.
Okay.
So we maintained the spaces we have. We're hopeful that that will be enough money. If it turns out that we find out we need more, we'll know that definitively in about 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
But right now, it looks
It-
good.
What's the range on that? Are we talking like several kids? or
$30,000 per kid.
Any idea of the number of kids? I know you can't tell for certain, but historically,
We
do you
know,
have any idea?
we
of
have
how many?
we have 5 attending right now. 1 has withdrawn, 2 are graduating, and so we had between 3 and 4 spots available, and we currently have 4 bodies for those spots right now. 2 are definite, 2 have applied, we don't know if they'll be going.
Okay, so we're not talking like 200,000 or 300,000?
No. And this is as of today that we know.
What was the increase in transportation, the tuition didn't increase?
In special education or regular?
Special education.
Is that the bus contracts?
Yeah.
That's the vendor that we've had for a long time, there have been some changes with that vendor, and there was a significant increase with that.
The company was bought by another company, the service hasn't been as good, but the price has gone up.
Love that. Some health insurance.
I was gonna see the life, I can see you laughing. Jumping up and down.
So on vocational, it's been something, at least since I was on finance committee, that you see a range. And it seems to establish over time for those couple of kids that go and go to the same school together, and then you see some drop out. But it's a huge commitment for the town. It's over $30,000 per student to go to Norfolk Aggie or what's the other one?
Bristol or Chelsea.
And then the South Shore Vocational Technical.
Right. So, on the elementary school budget, I think what you see is a reasonable budget. I don't think there's anything within the budget that is above and beyond. You could make an argument for the bus that I added in, but where it's been an issue the whole time, I think it makes sense.
With the special education, I did just want to point out, we worked really hard, and the Grable worked really hard for all the towns to develop in-district programming, and you can see we're starting to get reductions, which we were not having before. So we're really pleased with the way the numbers are coming in. The only increase you really see is in transportation, which we can't control. I mean, we don't have buses, we don't have our own buses, but in terms of tuition, getting the students to stay with us, they are staying with us at this point, or more of them are. So we're hoping that that trend will continue. So it's actually a reduction of 2.36%, which is wonderful, and we haven't had that in a while. So there's some good news in there.
We talked about transportation contracts, is that cost per rider, or is it cost
For which category? Do you know?
the general transportation?
We have a contract based on the number of buses that we need, based on the mix of the buses between the region and then the elementaries. So they share, Halifax uses 10 in the region, but only 9 in the elementary, and they're looking to add that one back. So we pay a per bus rate for that.
Boston, is that an annual contract? When I hear the word contract, I think multi-year.
It was a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extensions, and we will be going into the last of the 1-year extension. So after this, we'll be going back up to bid again.
Staying on the transportation, I noticed that like the general transportation base contract, it's about 5% or so. But then I look at the athletic transportation and it's 17%. Why is there such a big jump in the
Are you in Silver Lake now?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know where we are. But we're all talking transportation, so.
That's okay. Do you mind if we just hold up on the
Yes.
Silver Lake? Okay,
Yeah,
just because I
that's
want to
fine.
make sure that I know we have folks who are
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were talking transportation.
doing multiple
or other things. Yeah.
roles, but yeah. Are there any other questions about specifically the Halifax Elementary School budget?
What do you guys need to see from us? Like, are you waiting to, like, go through the whole town situation and then you'll make a decision on where you think some shaving needs to be done or whether it's accepted or?
Yeah, we basically still have to go, we're still receiving, we just received some edited requests, and there are like big requests from other departments too, so that's why we only went through and voted on the lines that were the exact same over last year, and that doesn't mean that they'll stay that way either. Or reduced, and that, there were very few reductions. There were very few folks who had.
Don't motion those two.
So that's what we've done just to get a sense of, so we could start plugging in some numbers and think, okay, if we're gonna present the town a level service budget over last year, here's what we could try to do. We haven't yet sat down and considered every request that everyone's made taken in totality and where that puts us in relation to what we can actually afford, and can we keep the $300,000 buffer that we want. We're hoping that our conversations tonight move us a lot closer in terms of understanding a couple of the bigger lines that are in our budget. But to be honest, we still have other departments to meet too, because of snow and everything else, that things got a little bit pushed off that are gonna affect the entire town's budget.
Okay, so I guess let's just keep the communication lines open and.
Yeah, this has been extremely helpful. I
Yeah.
was aligned with this whole thing before this meeting. so-
Yeah, it's a lot, it's a lot. But I mean, if you can give us any feedback.
Yeah.
So we can have a discussion about it.
And I think the plan was, and we sort of talked about it at a previous meeting too, was to, as we as a finance committee start, as more of the pieces come together, to be able to put out a memo to all of the departments at once and say, okay, here's what we're thinking, here's where we are so far.
This is where we need to go.
Right,
Yeah.
just, and again, that's to keep the lines of communication open with everyone, and that so everyone gets the same exact information about what we're looking at. And ultimately, right, we all know it's up to the voters to decide, but at least we can be telling you, taking a big step back, and with what everyone has asked for, here's what we're thinking we might be able to do. And that memo or that communication, we think would come out hopefully this week or next week. And we had talked to Charlie about kind of putting something like that together about where we are.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You have to say.
This is Gordon's birthday party.
It
He only
is.
Oh
turned
my God,
30
it's your
once.
birthday?
Yeah.
It is his birthday.
Oh my God, worst friend ever.
I meant to pick up a cupcake.
I'll sing you happy birthday later.
I know.
Now you have to go. Okay.
Well, he couldn't make Wednesday, so
I couldn't make Wednesday.
I moved it to accommodate him, then he
did.
mentioned it was his
Can't believe I
birthday. I'm
forgot
like,
your
well, it's your
birthday.
fault.
Terrible
It's
friend.
Wednesday, I wouldn't have had to go to get
I
here.
think 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how we celebrate it.
Times 9.
All right.
Thanks, Summer. Yep.
Thank you. Have a good night, folks. Okay, so now we'll talk, I didn't want to stifle discussion, but I think it might be easier to make sure we all our budget sheets separate. Now we'll talk about the Silver Lake Regional School District. You have that in your packet, thanks to Joy. That was the first set of
It's the
budgets.
first
in that. Look at the March 6th sheet.
Do you guys want to go over a quick rundown of how the assessment works?
That'd be helpful for me.
So you have Silver Lake votes a budget. Silver Lake has revenue that it generates, not a lot, but it has some. We have state aid, and then we have the contribution by town. So each town is required to have a minimum contribution, which you see on the front page. So that gets taken into the equation before any division of the assessment takes place. So if you turn to the second page,
How do you come up with the minimum?
the state formula comes up with that. Jason's been working really
Yeah,
hard to learn that.
Jason actually could really explain it well.
In consideration of the fact that it's Gordon's birthday, I won't do that. I'll give you the briefest overview.
I was gonna say, in 10 seconds or less.
Foundation budget funding.
Pretend you're writing a tweet.
Do you want it? As Edward from 1993 dictated, the state of Massachusetts was constitutionally obligated to provide an adequate education to all of its citizens. So they established the foundation budget formula. It takes into consideration the types of students you have and adds a dollar value to those students. So regular ed, special ed, English language learners, low-income students. They all get a multiplier. It comes out with a base budget for the town. Then they look at your ability to pay. That's calculated based on two primary sources. They look at your assessed property values, and they look at the income of every single resident in your town, and they come together with basically what is, your ability to pay your percentage of the foundation budget. And that's what Gordon was speaking to. That's the minimum assessment from the state of Massachusetts for the foundation budget.
And we can't control what number the state says is your ability to pay. So before we do anything, if you look on the front page, your increase was at $78,095. Okay, so that happened before we could do anything, okay?
So then when
We're doing great, keep going.
so looking at the increase for Kingston and Plimpton, now, our friend Jason's getting really, his town's gonna get beat up this year with a $110,000 increase of a net minimum contribution. So that change over time, Plimpton is usually around 40,000. So Halifax goes up, Kingston goes up, and Plimpton just stays level. This is a large increase for the town of Plimpton, and it shifts a significant amount of money when you look at the percentage-wise of the assessment. So if you turn to the second page, Joy, if I'm stepping on your toes.
No, go, you're doing great.
Your birthday privilege.
I'm perfectly happy.
So weird to see
I got
Gordon
your
on the
back, I got
side.
your back.
I know.
Gordon, it's really weird for me to see.
Yeah, I know.
You wanna come sit
I
here?
don't even know who you are.
I thoroughly
It's
enjoyed it.
Gordon redone. I don't know. Redo.
It's been the easiest year to be the chair of this whole, like,
Okay, go ahead, sorry to interrupt you.
So you can see the current fiscal year FY19's assessment and the assessment increase for FY20 and the percentage change. So this includes the total operating and capital. So if you break out the operating and capital, you can see that. So then you see the operating budget of the 25, almost 26 million is what Silver Lake votes on. It includes the reimbursement of the insurance from Pembroke. So when Pembroke split, there's a certain number of retirees that are receiving benefits. So there's an insurance premium payment to Silver Lake from that. The capital budget, you have state aid, transportation aid, CTE tuition. CTE is the vocational program where people tuition into Silver Lake from other schools. One thing to note, Pembroke took a vote to have Silver Lake be the exploratory,
Yes.
like the first place that if their students want to go to vocational, it'll be at Silver Lake. So that was a good thing for Silver Lake. You had the shared costs, which is the amount of expenditures that happen across the union, and Silver Lake basically expends that money and then receives the money back from Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton. And then the power purchase agreement was an agreement that took place 4 or 5 years ago now.
We're just finishing up our fifth year?
Fifth year?
It started in May of 2014, so we're just hitting 5 years.
So $245,000 is revenue that's coming in to Silver Lake. So
Where is that from?
the power purchase agreement,
So a solar farm,
Oh, you have a solar farm down
we receive funds
From a solar farm?
That's probably the easiest way to say it.
so you see the capital expenditure off to the right on that line. 2 years ago, Christine,
July 2015, we refinanced, and that changed the outlook of our debt. So this year, its total debt would have been $60,000 higher had we not refinanced. So it's made a significant contribution.
so you'll see the total assessments include the both operating and capital. So when you look at this budget versus last year's budget, when you compare the assessments, because of the changing in time, this is something that caught me off guard when we were looking at this. Last year's, because when the assessments are basically all done before April 1st, we have to have a budget in place. So the assessments are based off the governor's numbers. So last year you saw a large increase in regional transportation. So we expended that money in the FY19 budget, but in the FY20 budget, you're actually seeing that increase take place. So you're getting the money a year later, basically. So that was something, if you try to compare the spreadsheet from last year to this year, it's something you'll get caught up on. On the numbers, you'll see that it's 600 and 600. Here's the total.
Totally,
$771,000.
Yeah. So, to Fred's point earlier about the sustainability of the budget, it's been something that I preached since I sat on that side of the table for many years. And I think we're getting to the point where I think this budget will be supported by the 3 towns. But I think looking forward, as the splits change, as the percentages change, it will be more difficult for the towns to take that increase. But basically, you've been told that Kingston will vote this, and either Halifax or Clinton, if they vote it, it goes through, because you only need 2 out of the 3 towns. So the number for Halifax is 132,000, which 133,000 for an increase.
Which it's required.
78 of it is required.
Right, so it's only a difference of $60,000 over the requirement. That's how I look at it. I look at it like, we have a minimum requirement, so I'll take that rate.
Yeah,
And then say, okay, what's our actual increase? And I sit there and said $60,000 on a school budget, that's how you're telling me?
Yeah,
Okay.
the minimum was a 2.3% increase, the overall for Halifax was 2.7.
Right.
Which is still the lowest of all.
Right. And if you look at our numbers of the students, because of the rate, it's based on the number of students we have. We're actually in a trending down position for at least the next 2 years. But then if you look, there's a 99 coming up. I think that's grade 2.
Grade 2.
Yeah. So when you hit that, you're going to start seeing the increase. So it's like we're going to be going down for the next 2 years, but we want to plan for that increase because it's coming.
So where are some of the other areas, so let's, kind of to Fred's point, if we think about what the town's on the hook for beyond what the state actually requires, what are some, because I see, for example, instructional hardware seems to be a pretty significant increase over.
Yeah, I think it's less the assessment and more just the spending, right? Were there any glaring things that you see that you're unhappy with or think should be refined?
If we're asking for a level service budget, at least if the town of Halifax is asking for a level service budget.
So from my perspective, everything that they brought before us, for at least the technology, we had a presentation on that. We had a presentation on vocational. I don't think that there's anything that's beyond. There's no adding teachers. There's no adding.
Right. You'll see like some of the replacement or equipment is high, but because we went back and zeroed that out for a couple of years. So all of a sudden, like my son's saying, things are breaking all over the place. We got to get to the point where we start replacing this stuff. So that's why you're seeing the increase, because it's like it gets to the point where you can't teach if you don't have a microscope that works. You know?
Also, to speak to the point of transportation,
Yeah, it's just the athletics, because I was just...
but transportation in general, we're bringing a $771,000 increase, and close to $200,000 of that is coming from transportation costs, from regular transportation to our special ed transportation.
Right.
We find ourselves not only having to meet the needs of our students, but also when we put out our contract for bid for transportation, we get one answer. We're finding that in the state of Massachusetts, it's almost like the transportation companies have come to an agreement that they're going to have certain segments of the state that they will only answer to, and that forces us to go with the bid we get.
Right.
We're working right now with Beacon Hill to see if we can start spreading out to regional transportation authorities, and if they can start putting in bids for school busing now. Under the current way that the state runs things, that's not permitted when we go out for bid. So it's another way to look at it, and just to make Beacon Hill aware of the issues we're having with the high cost of transportation. It's also why we authorized Christine moving forward to not do a year-by-year contract for transportation, but multi-year, and gave her that latitude and authority when negotiating, and then she can bring it back to us and we can finalize the vote to accept what she can work on from that end.
Yeah, my only concern was, as I said, I was seeing the increase, and I was getting, and we're looking at a pretty low number, but that might not always be there. So if athletic costs keep going up and up and up, and all of a sudden we have to come back and say, we need you to cut something, I'm not gonna tell you to cut a math class, I'm gonna tell you cut the athletics. Because it's the student that takes the math class that's gonna get a degree using the math, as opposed to somebody, realistically, they're not gonna be a professional athlete. And so it gets to a point where I know we have athletic costs, and we don't really want to pass those on to, the parents, but at what point are you thinking that if that number gets too high, we have to then go back and increase the participation cost for athletics?
I think anytime we find the three towns asking us to be extra vigilant and careful, we've tried to keep open line of communications, and since Joy has become our superintendent, I think she's been thoroughly transparent, two-way communication with all three towns.
Yeah.
I sat down way back in September with the finance committee chair, the chair of the selectmen, and the town manager of Kingston to have that conversation. I know that early on in the fall, there was some conversations here with some members of the school committee from Halifax, and just getting some idea of where your town is going to be, what you can support. And we really strove to give that level funded budget for you. If we were asked to do differently, we would obviously look at some of those areas that could be considered more expendable. But we also know that there's students who the only reason they get up every day and come to that math class is because they know they have that practice in that game that night.
Right.
And we need to keep drawing those students in, even if it seems to be esoteric.
Well, I don't disagree, and I must say, they're doing an excellent job with fundraising. I mean, like, my son's into drama and music, and they've raised $3,000 in the last couple of weeks, and I know, like, the tennis have done the same thing. They're doing a great job. It's just, I'm thinking to myself, down the road, as our numbers increase, and let's say the economy turns, I'm thinking, I don't want to cut a math class.
Right.
It's going to be...
And I think that's an important point. It's not if the economy turns, it's
It's
when.
gonna be when.
And it's going to be how deeply municipalities feel it, which is why, to come back to my previous point about sort of where you see the, like, for the example, the equipment costs. If we're, and again, this is what we've done with every department, to be fair, is to push back and say, okay, we understand that there have been areas, so to go from a $2,000 budget to a $50,000 or $60,000 budget, if we're asking other departments to make cuts, we're gonna ask the same thing of you, which is, when we ask for a level service budget, and you come back to us with an increase, if we have to prioritize things that we can and cannot do, what would you like to communicate to us as your priorities? Because otherwise, and this is not picking on you, it's everybody, if we bring in every department and we say, well, what do you want? And they say this, and we say, well, we don't know if we can do this, and we just shrug at each other, we're not really actually having a constructive conversation that's gonna move the budget forward in any way. So in looking at particular lines that you've added in significant increases, and regardless of, how the assessment is split, what are things that you wanna communicate to us that are your priorities for this particular fiscal year?
Again, I guess, and I understand the point you're getting at, and I think one of the things with with schools that I know can be frustrating with the finance committees depending on their understanding of it. School committees have line item autonomy. So if you were to say to the school committee, to Jason as chair, Gordon as a member, you know, look, we appreciate what you're saying, but Halifax is unwilling to support this budget unless it's cut by 5,000 or 10,000, and then the school committee would go back and they would make those decisions. And that's, you know, that's, I think, the point that you're trying to get at is what are our priorities, and I think, if I understand correctly, this is a level service budget. We added no programs. Last year, we did add the Allied Health. I think you attended some of those, correct?
Yep.
You know, and that was something that we had really worked very hard to bring into a new vocational program that we had added.
And
This
it's
is
got
just
a really good response,
great
extremely
response.
well.
Yeah. So this is a level service budget. We have attempted to continue to increase our ability to bring in additional revenue. We aren't really a fundraising, we're a public school, but we have the net metering agreement, and we're going back out to bid because we believe we have the ability to bring in additional revenue, which will help all the towns. You know, so we're attempting to do those things, but I guess, you know, and to your point, Fred, if I may, on the transportation, so for our 18 to 22 program, our special education program is called Transitions, we lease a van because the kids go out in the afternoon and they're learning job skills. That van is now used by athletics.
Okay.
So the van is, you know, they really like the van a lot. Is, you know, they're using that van, so they're not getting charged. So we're seeing those kinds of small savings, like I don't know if the tennis team is too big, but maybe golf, like some of the smaller teams are able to use a 15-passenger van as opposed to us renting a bus.
Well, we're not like Pembroke, when their band came over, it was like 5 times the size of our band. They must have had like 2 full buses just for their band.
It's sad, isn't it?
But another item for acquisition that we're looking at is a plasma table for our metal fabrication shop. Now, we've put this off for at least 3 budget cycles. It's getting to the point that if we don't get this plasma table, we're going to be graduating students who don't have the 21st century skills to become gainfully employed in metal fabrication. So that is one of the items you might see as a rather large acquisition in the budget. But again, it's been several years where we have tried to cut back on those kinds of things to try and meet the needs of the towns. And this year, that happens to be in it. If we lose that project, we lose Chapter 74 funding. That's additional funding above and beyond Chapter 70 funding we get from the state. And we could also possibly lose the tuition of the students who've come from other districts who pay us money to come to our medical fabrication shop. So it was a difficult decision, and we've been debating our budget since back in Christmas time. You know, we came with the executive budget, the building principals came to Joy, she whittled them down, she brought the budget before her team in central office, they whittled it down even further. I got to see it, the school committee's seen it, we're on to version 2. And this is not the baby budget. This is really a fully developed and realized situation where we are now. And what we're asking for, we believe, is all needed. I mean, we could speak stories to every single line item on the budget, but I wouldn't want to keep you here all night.
I want to acknowledge Kim because she had her hand up in the
Yeah, I
back.
just want to make a couple of comments, and he's correct about that, piece of equipment in the shop. I remember hearing about it, and I certainly remember the fact that we could lose our accreditation, and if Pembroke has chosen us to tuition in children, we could potentially lose income there. But aside from that, you're saying that this is a level service budget. There are no new programs and no new positions, but I'll address that afterwards. But I want to address what Joy said, and I have to correct you, Joy. Yes, the school committee has line item autonomy that during the year, they have the ability to move money from one line item to another if there's a need. But when you are developing a budget, the taxpayers of all of the communities have every right to know what the intention of the budget is. And so if you're debating the budget as a committee and you're bringing it forth to the finance committees to vet, to present, or to support or to not support at a town meeting, then we need to know what the intention is. So we have every right to ask about programs and prioritizing everything. Because again, the reason why you have line item autonomy, I don't necessarily agree with it, because it makes everybody else not on an even keel, but you have it and that's fine. But again, you do it, you can move things as things happen, but your intent of your budget is what matters. That everybody knows going into the budget season, these are the priorities of the school committee, and this is what our tax dollars are being planned on being spent. And so as long as it is a level service budget, then the board of selectmen, I'm only one person here, would have to support that because that's what we asked for. Aside from that, the budget that's before you and printed here is level service. There is, however, a position that has been brought to the town through an article which doesn't normally happen. And that is for an additional resource officer at the middle school. It's for an overtime position. It is a position that I don't know why we need the position. It hasn't been fully communicated to our chief of really there's a specific reason why we need it. We just started being able to fund a resource officer at the high school. Again, it's a new position, and what bothers me is that it's been sent to us via an article, and that's an operating budget. And if it's a position, it should not be outside of the budget for Silver Lake. And I'm told that it's being funded with $36,000 just for the percentage for Halifax, and it's an overtime position. So I would like that to be addressed, because it's not something that I could support at all.
And that's nothing that's been communicated to the finance committee, at least to the chair.
I'd be happy to address that.
Sure.
That's good. So I have brought this up a few times before. I've had conversations with Charlie and with other people. So here's the history of it. The school resource officer is not in the budget. That is completely funded by the town of Kingston. It has always been funded by the town of Kingston. But if a Halifax child has difficulty, if a Halifax child needs help, the Kingston police officer still helps the Halifax child. So Halifax and Clinton have been the recipient of the town of Kingston funding the position. The reason why it has to go through the town of Kingston budget is it is within the parameters of Kingston. John Shaves knows about this position. I'm not sure why he wouldn't support it.
I'm talking about the middle school position, not
I
the
know,
high school.
I'm just going through the history.
The middle
You
school
indicated that the police officer was in the Silver Lake budget. He is not. He is completely in the Kingston budget. So
At the high school, it's funded at, really, it wasn't added in last year?
No, it's never been. So, for 3 years, the town of Kingston funded a part-time police officer, a school resource officer. It runs about $50,000. It was run on overtime. They did not add the position. This current year, they're funding a full-time position. That is a position that the town of Kingston is fully funded. Halifax and Clinton have never paid a dime for having a school resource officer at the building. What we are seeing is we need a full-time officer who is not trying to run between the high school and the middle school. We've got about 1,100 kids. We have a full-time officer now. Previously, we had a part-time officer trying to cover both buildings. Now we have a full-time officer who's mainly located at the high school and does go over to the middle school. What we would like to try to do, we would like to support, is having a part-time school resource officer who would be at the middle school, who would function as the one at the high school had previously until we got a full-time officer. The reason why it's overtime is the town of Kingston would not be willing to add a full-time officer on because you have to go through, and you know this, Kim, you have to go through the police
You
academy.
can have a mutual aid agreement between the communities so that you can perhaps fund it with a part-time officer.
It's not
And
possible.
prior to this, we had a resource officer before budget cuts about 10 years ago that was within the budget. And that's where positions belong. They don't belong outside on separate articles.
So my understanding, according to the Kingston Police Chief and at the monthly meetings that we have, is we could not have mutual aid because the police chief has to have access to, and it's in the town of Kingston. So it's within the town of Kingston contract, you would be taking work away from Kingston police officers. It would not be acceptable. So the suggestion from the police chiefs is that we come up with a warrant article that would pay for Halifax and Plimpton to pay a portion of what Halifax and Kingston has paid for 4 years now.
I think, I'm just speaking as one member of the finance committee, I think that's one of the things that's difficult because in the last 8 minutes now, we found that there's an additional operating cost that was not being presented within the operating budget, but the operating budget is being presented to us as being level service. And we and Halifax have departments coming to us asking for additional positions to meet state mandates in other areas, right, of municipal governance. So we're trying to evaluate all of those positions equally. And all those other departments have fit those into those operating budgets. So now that we're having a full meeting between our committees to find out that there's an additional position that's being added in as an article is a little difficult because, again, we're trying to weigh everyone's priorities against one another's and fit it all within one zero-sum pot of money.
What was the reason for the article versus including it in the operating budget?
The reason for the article was we were brought forward a level service budget as we were asked, and the idea was to bring it forward to the town because this would be a different way of funding because you would have to set up an agreement where the money would actually go to the Kingston Police. We are separate. It has nothing to do with our budget.
Again, Joy, prior to this, I'll give you a little history of this position since I've been around for about, 25 years and have watched this whole subject of the resource officer. So for many years, when we were with Pembroke, we had a resource officer. Shortly after the breakup, we still had one, and then due to budget cuts, we had to cut the resource officer. Was it an ideal situation? It wasn't ideal, but everybody was getting through it, and it wasn't causing huge issues. Joy, you're saying 5 years ago? I don't remember. I thought it was less than that, but about 4 or 5 years ago, Kingston offered, on their own, offered to put a resource officer in there. I, again, said we can't really afford it because adding a position when we were level servicing, but the police chief wanted to donate his officer's time. I knew eventually that we would be expected to pay for it. I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's how we do it. And if you're going to do it, then you need to put it within the operational budget and have it debated as a new position, because that's what it is. It can be paid for through the operating budget, because that's how we did it historically before it was taken away. So I disagree with it being an article. I think it can be worked out. I also feel like it could be worked out so that all the towns share in working a police officer, because we grow up, our officers grow up with these kids in Halifax and then they go to the middle school. Why couldn't we have a mutual agreement and try to work it out so that it's not costing the taxpayers money to be paying overtime, and that every department gets an opportunity to work with the children of Silver Lake because that's who they grow up with, of all 3 towns.
So I think maybe if the selectmen, the 3 towns, and the police chiefs, and Joy talked, that maybe you could come to an agreement on that. But it sounds like on being outside of Kingston's control,
Well,
if it was before.
take that aside, I'm not supporting any position that's on its side on an article. Wrong. If the school committee want to add it in and have it shared, and then we can have a separate talk about how it gets funded and who gets to cover it, that's one thing. But I'm not supporting an article at town meeting the way that it's set up. I'm only one vote out of 100 people that come to town meeting, but I will be vocal against it. I will tell you that.
Well, let me ask a simple question. If it gets voted down at the Halifax town meeting and approved at the other one, what do you do?
We own
Just
it.
cut back the hours?
No, we don't own anything. There's nobody there now. So if Plimpton voted it, the person would be at the middle school for the amount of time Plimpton would pay.
For that amount of time?
And this is not the same budget regulations we're held to as the regional budget is. This is only an article for Plimpton and Halifax as it was currently designed.
It's disappointing.
It just seems pretty spotty, because if we shoot it down and Plimpton doesn't, or vice versa, then you're only gonna get a portion of it. So is that worth it? Is that, portion still effective. And because it's in an article, we vote these articles every year.
Correct.
Which is why if it's a position, we put it in the operating budget in the first place, so that we debate it every year as a service, as opposed to, maybe another contingency of people show up at the second year and they say no.
So in my conversations with the police chiefs, and again, security is a huge issue in schools. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that you're not aware of in terms of the safety of our students. In my conversations with the police chiefs, we went around about the best options. The police chief was very concerned about putting on a full-time officer because of benefits, because of adding it. If we cut our budget and we cut the police officer, then the town of Kingston would own the unemployment, like they would have no place to put them. This was the suggestion of the police chief. He felt that this made the most sense for them. Again, if Halifax chooses not to support it, that's fine. I was bringing it forward as a warrant article because, my belief is that parents in Halifax would want there to be police officers in school. The elementary school was interested in trying to have a police officer there. The secondary schools tend to have a school resource officer. We are somewhat unusual in that we only had half-time for the last several years, and we've only recently had one full-time, and we have no official coverage at the middle school.
But I think that's what makes it difficult, because again, we're evaluating other departments' requests for new positions that they've put within their operating budget. So to make good faith communications between each other, I think we all have to be on the same page as to what goes into an operating budget and what doesn't. And what personally frustrates me is to find out that something is being added as a warrant article that is rightfully to be placed within an operating budget that we're all supposed to weigh against other ones.
So on that, the issue isn't so much that an ongoing operating cost versus a warrant article. The issue is how do you pay that? Should Silver Lake be budgeting that, assessing the 3 towns for that position, right? And then turn around and paying Kingston for that officer. And that's the legal issue and the reason why Joey brought it forward this way.
That's where you go to the Gordon. I don't understand why all of a sudden we can't.
It sounds like, Kim, that it's the Kingston police chief who has determined that it must be a Kingston police officer that has this job and not willing to amend that. So that's why.
So did you have a discussion as a school committee member on this warrant article? And the school committee supported it? Did you support it, Gordon?
Did we take a vote on this?
We gave Joy the authority to move forward. There was no vote on the article.
But it's technically, I would think it would come from you.
It did. We were absolutely interested in engaging and increasing.
And the whole overtime thing, did you guys talk about that? How are there other ways to do it? Were there incidents at the middle school that would warrant that much coverage? Have you guys vetted all of that?
It definitely wasn't just a warrant. We actually have done a safety audit of our campus with police chiefs and fire chiefs from the communities. And this was one of the areas that they said that they would like to see us address.
Well, I don't know if our chief actually voted for it, so I'd like to check with him before that said.
Again, I don't think
I'm sure the Kingston chief voted.
I don't think there was a vote per se. It was more of an audit, an assessment, and a conversation at a high level about some of the safety concerns we have about the physical structures of the buildings, but also the staff of the buildings as well. And obviously, I can't get into the physical.
Yes, but I'd like to
talk about the staff.
I could support the concept, but my question is, if it gets funded in a warrant article this year, does this become an annual article? Because how do you fund it next year?
It would.
It should though.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, it should. It should go in the budget. It should be assessed.
I don't understand why, if as a school committee and administrators, you recognize the need for resource officers in your school. I understand why they have to be Kingston officers. But why you don't come up with a number and put it in your budget and it gets split 3 ways?
Again,
And when did the chief in Kingston become the finance expert? I'm just, I don't want to kind of get nasty and I'm the new guy, I don't want to irritate anybody.
It sounds
But it
like their
just,
concern is that if they hire a full-time officer, then there's a budget cut and they cut the officer, that Kingston would be stuck with the bill.
Exactly.
right, but right now,
How is that different?
but they're paying the Kingston High School resource officer on overtime.
No, he's a full-time school resource officer
When did that happen?
this year. And again, we have never funded any of this through the budget.
But they don't want to fund, or anybody that's had this discussion up until tonight that we've been involved in it, doesn't want to fund a new position as a resource officer in the middle school, full-time, not on overtime, because it, again, I'm sitting there, I haven't seen the numbers, but it would seem to me if you put somebody in there in overtime, it's gonna cost you more than a full-time position with benefits.
It's the same issue for them, I think, is that if it gets cut or voted down, then Kingston's stuck with the bill for the additional officer.
Why don't you assess the 3 towns for the unemployment the same way that we would assess the unemployment if somebody got laid off?
If you had to lay off a teacher, how would you cover the unemployment?
When was this discussed as an article? Recently?
It has been discussed for a while. I don't remember the exact first date that we talked about it. We've been talking about doing that. That's why Kingston this year came up with the full-time. The town of Kingston is who answers calls at our school. And it's actually beneficial to them to have somebody there full-time. So, anytime there was an incident, they didn't have to keep sending somebody up to the high school. So now they have that person has the resource, it's within the jurisdiction. When we wanted to try to add to the safety and security of the buildings and provide additional supports, going back to the way it was funded prior to becoming full-time was what was suggested at that point in time. We've talked about adding ones for a while. Some of it is, I think it's been at least, for the 4 years that I've been here. I believe parents are supportive of the concept of having additional support to the school.
I'll tell you,
I don't know what the best.
concept, I just don't like the way it went.
And it also looks like that's the frame that's being used to justify the putting it in an article so that it bolsters its own political support and groundswell under that when, again, we're making decisions about new positions in other departments within the context of the operating budget. And I hate to keep just coming back to it because that's...
And we would help, our police officers would help if we could. So
I don't
owns it,
understand
but
that.
we would help if we
Right.
could. And that's the thing. I don't want to start, when we broke up with Pembroke, it was because Pembroke became too important. We need to still foster the relationship of all 3 towns and not one town
Right. You don't want to
dictates
do
or is
Kingston
bigger
big.
than, or it gets catered to, or it gets met with and we don't get met with. The whole thing. You need to be very aware of how that all looks. We're all a part of the
Well,
region.
again, I'm gonna go back to a question that I didn't hear an answer to. You're worried about if the funding fails and they have to lay off an officer. And who, Kingston right now, who cover that unemployment. If you lay off a teacher,
Oh, we pay for
who does?
the town. So
So it's divvied 3 ways.
Yes.
So why wouldn't this, if it was in the operating budget, why wouldn't it be handled the same way?
Because what Kingston was asking for was that the town of Halifax and Plimpton cover the junior high resource officer, while they covered the high school resource
They wanted to
officer.
dictate the terms of the
Right.
financing.
Right, Kingston's trying to dictate.
But again, it's
Again,
a whole,
I don't, if I could, I'm not sure it's a question of dictating. We are interested as a school system. of
I don't
increasing
disagree,
coverage.
Joy, I mean.
Yeah, no, I know, I just.
I clearly understand you need
Forced
it.
it upon
Right.
an article,
Just-
two different things.
but it's the process.
I
That's what-
get it, and
that's
I
what the
appreciate that,
concept
and I
of the
have to
process.
admit, I'm a bit at a loss as to the best way to do it. This was the only way, I had some conversations with Charlie, and I'm not used to Charlie being so quiet. Come on, Charlie.
Oh, I don't think he's worried either.
But, I don't know how else to fund the town of Kingston Police Department.
So
So
this
this
was
was,
in the budget, and you have it be part of your budget.
Or at least have the discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
we had a series of meetings with Plumpton about potentially merging the fire departments. It
Right.
didn't work out, but we still went through numerous scenarios,
Yes.
discussions, and people had their say, and it was
Yep.
public. There was public participation, so I don't think there was any of that. So
No.
it's not the concept, it's the fact that we're now hearing
So-
about an article here at the last
right, but
minute.
again, and I apologize, I'm just trying, may I catch up with you a little bit? I'm trying to work my way through. So Kingston fully funds their resource officer. It's not in our budget. If we added a part-time resource officer into the budget, how do we separate and not charge Kingston, because Kingston's already fully funding one, we only charge Halifax and Plimpton. I don't even know how we would do it, you know what I mean? And I don't want to add a Kingston police officer, because Kingston has been funding that for us. So I don't know how to do it, I
I think you
apologize.
sit down
Well,
with
I know, but that's why
Charlie
you
and
have the
town
discussion.
administrators,
Yeah.
right?
That's why we had the discussions with Plumpton
Yeah.
about the fire department.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is it's the process and that I don't think we should walk into this and just assume, well, if Kingston's gonna pay for this, they've already made the decision, that's what they wanna do. If this is gonna be an agreement between the three towns, I think we have to start from scratch and negotiate the agreement and not just walk in with the assumption that Kingston gets to set the terms, and this isn't picking on anyone in Kingston. But if that's how a three-way split's going to work, you don't let one of the three come in and predetermine their side and then watch the other two work it out. And that's sort of what it feels like now, is that we're getting this kind of put in front of us and said, well, you two have to make it work because this other one's already figured out their third. And that's hard for a small town to take.
I think you go back to the drawing board and you sit down with town administrators. You can have the police chiefs there, but they're, again, to Bradford's point, they're not the financial people to try to figure it out. But you sit down and the chief should be there to negotiate, because I think, again, it would be nice to negotiate the agreement so that we have some part-time officers that aren't at overtime, that our officers could all use the work, as we say, and we can sit in a room and figure out how we can do it.
Even if the end result is the way we're doing it now, it would still be nice
Right.
to have those
The
discussions.
conversation would be nice, yes.
So, because even if the Kingston Police Department is funding that position, that's the town of Kingston funding that position.
Correct.
So why don't you take that money out of the town of Kingston operating budget? And it would probably wind up being less if it was split three ways.
It would be, but what happened was, the police chief, and Gordon, you'll remember, because you were on the finance committee, we could not be funding extra positions. And he said, no, you don't even have to pay for it. I'm gonna donate the time, I'm gonna donate it to you. I don't know if the taxpayers of Kingston know that they're the ones that are paying for that resource officer, and we're grateful that they did, regardless if they knew it or not. But we knew that this day would come that we would need to start to pay toward this. So this is not a shock to us, but as Melinda said, we should be part of the conversation to kind of design it instead of, here, this is what we all decided, this is what you're gonna do, and to have it outside the budget, not right. So let's all start from the beginning and figure it out. I think you need to move on.
Are there any other lines on the Silver Lake budget that anyone has any questions on or wants to ask of the Silver Lake Committee? Okay. So as we told the elementary school committee, the finance committee for the town of Halifax is still reviewing budgets from different departments and bringing every committee and department head in to have these conversations. We hope to be able to communicate to all of the departments relatively quickly, sort of where the overall budget picture is. We have an executive session after we break tonight to talk about collective bargaining. And as we start to fill in more pieces of the puzzle, we'll be sure to tell all of the departments and committees what we're looking at, and if we do have to ask for any further decreases, or if we have to ask anyone to pull back a little bit, based on what the entire picture looks like. So that's sort of where we are in the process, and that's been the same thing that we've told to every department head and committee member that's come before us, is that we've had the conversation and we're gonna take all of them put together and communicate back to you.
And just to make sure we're short of dates on our timeline, and I know Gordon mentioned the April 1st budget deadline for Silver Lake. We have a meeting this Thursday to vote the budget. So just wanted you to be aware of that in case you wanted to communicate with us prior to that vote.
Yeah, we're gonna have another meeting Wednesday night. We're doubling up on the week, so if not tomorrow, then we'll try to get something out. We'll work with Charlie too to make sure that, because you do have I think the next quickest meeting coming up, that we can get comments back to you all.
Thank you.
I'll be there Thursday anyways.
Can you forward a copy of the spreadsheet?
I'll ask Sandy. I don't have the most recent one. Mine's still on 3.6. Okay. Thank you all very much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any other public participation? So what we will do is adjourn the open meeting, and then we'll move into an executive session. So would anyone like a motion, or I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second that motion.
You wanna make a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you.